Week 0 college football. I love you. Brent Key getting over there in the student section who made the trip to Dublin, Ireland, and Georgia Tech. They plant their flag, albeit in another country, but right in front of everyone in the ACC that says, you know what? You're going to have to contend with me and our team's second-year head coach. Second full-time year as the interim before that. But Georgia Tech pulls off a stunner against 10th-ranked Florida State, a Florida State team that was trying to prove to the country last year was a mistake. They lost a lot of players to the NFL. They had to come back with a new quarterback and a lot of new skill position players, and all Haynes King did was ran the offense masterfully up front. Trevor Matich, Sam Acho, and Matt Barrie with you here as we're going to take you up to 4 o'clock, talk about this in a Week 0 college football game that could have reverberations when the actual season starts. I just introduced the fellas. Here they are. Trevor Matich, I'm going to start with you because he's a big fella up front. You saw from start to finish, there was no doubt about who was the more physical team in the trenches today, and that was Georgia Tech.
They had 4 starting offensive linemen return from last year. They had unfinished business. And watching this game begin, the first several drives, it became clear that this was like Mike Tyson was fighting Mike Tyson. I mean, Florida State came down and just pounded the ball in for their opening touchdown. Georgia Tech didn't wilt. They had a drive with 6 plays, 5 runs, just rammed it down Florida State's throat to answer that initial Seminole touchdown. I'll tell you, right from the beginning, you knew this was a heavyweight slugfest.
That's what I loved about what Brent Key just told Katie George there in the postgame interview. He said it's all about knowing who your team is. I think everyone looked at Florida State, top 10 team, undefeated a year ago, perhaps gave them a little too much credit based on last year's bona fides, based on what was returning relative to what Georgia Tech brought to the field. I don't think anyone within this program is surprised that Georgia Tech especially got this one.
Well, that's what we saw in the beginning of this game. There was early energy versus sustained success. Think about early energy. You plan for this all offseason. The first 15 plays, we talked about it in the break. The first series or two, but then all of a sudden, Brent Key and Georgia Tech said, hey, no, we knew we were going to get that punch for the Mike Tyson reference. We're going to come back in Evander Holyfield and bring that long-term success for 4 quarters.
You're seeing a look now there in the stadium. Brent Key getting the trophy. I had mentioned a second ago how a game like this is Haynes King set to get the Player of the Game trophy.
The player of the game, everybody, Haynes King. Give it up for Haynes King, our MVP.
How about Haynes King in his college football career? Started at Texas A&M. He was a highly rated recruit. Didn't work out for whatever reason under Jimbo Fisher. Goes there to Georgia Tech. And when you look at, Otz and I were talking about this during the game, that Brent Key in his second year, he thinks he's building this thing foundation by foundation. You can talk all you want, but you need to see the results on the field. And that's what this win does today against Florida State.
And not just for the players in the locker room, but also for recruits, players who've been excited about Georgia Tech and thinking that, okay, I like what I hear from Brent Key, but let me see it on the field. If you're watching this game around the nation, if you're a player who's from Georgia, maybe he's excited about this program, you thought you believed it at the end of last season. Now you've seen it and you really believe it.
And we talk about the big guys up front for Georgia Tech's offense. They were phenomenal. But the little guys in the back end of Georgia Tech's defense were also phenomenal. DJ Uiagalelei, for the first really 3 quarters of this game, tried to go deep a few times. And in man coverage, those vaunted, young, talented recruits from high school and then transfers from Florida State at wide receiver were smothered. There was nowhere for DJU to throw the ball. Then in the 4th quarter, he finally found a couple of openings on 4th down, twice in their game-tying touchdown drive. But ultimately, the reason that Georgia Tech's defense was able to slow down that Florida State running game was because the little guys on the back end were fantastic in man coverage.
By the way, the pictures you were seeing there live in Dublin, this isn't January 2nd or January 3rd after a big bowl game. It is what, August 24th. Right. I mean, that's how big of a game this is to set the tone for the rest of the season. We'll get back to Georgia Tech in a minute. I do want to talk to Florida State side of this, because this was a program that was put in the national spotlight for all of the right and wrong reasons. 13-0 a year ago. They lose Jordan Travis, a debilitating injury that in most people's eyes knocked them out of being one of the best 4 teams in the country in the college football playoff. That's a chip on your shoulder moment for your program to go into an offseason, albeit a lot of those players gone, but you regroup with some guys in the portal. You want this win to prove to everybody that what we saw last year was not an aberration. It's what Mike Norvell has built.
Well, not necessarily, because you made a great point, Matt Barrie, in that, yes, there is that history from last season, but a lot of the players who were there last season are gone. Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, they're in the NFL. Keon Coleman's playing for the Buffalo Bills right now. There are 17 new transfers on this team. And so though there was that feeling from the players who were there, a lot of those players are gone. Jordan Travis, quarterback, is gone. Right. A lot of the defensive stars, Kalen DeLoach, gone. And
Benson, Johnny Wilson.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And so there wasn't this sense of, well, we got to go prove to the world. No, this is a new team, and that new team on the defensive side of the ball wasn't able to get it done.
Foundationally, though, it's still Florida State football. It's one of the biggest brands in the country. This is not how they needed their season to start.
And my sense in their first drive was that they were trying to do that. No, it is a new team. You're totally right about that. But they got the ball first. Florida State drove the ball up to the 50-yard line, and then 5 straight runs straight down Georgia Tech's throat, opening touchdown, and then a swinging gate trick play for 2 points and a 2-point conversion to go up 8-0. And when I saw that, I thought, you know what? This program wants to show that they are dominant in every way, right? Well, Georgia Tech had something to say about that when they came back and answered that touchdown. But I think that they wanted to do that. But this is where I think the playoff.
There you go. With 12 teams, you're not out of it by any stretch of the imagination.
This is a Florida State team with a new quarterback, a whole bunch of new receivers, and it'll take time for them to get rolling. Michigan, similar situation. Their new head coach, new quarterback, a whole bunch of new receivers.
Probably ranked a lot
new
based on what we
offensive
saw
line.
last year.
But they play Texas in week 2. They play USC in week 4. And if they stumble early, this 12-team playoff still allows them to stay in the national race and still make the playoff if they don't win their own conference.
We think 10-2 is going to get a number of teams in the playoff. But when you look, Boston College, Memphis, that's a big game from Memphis out of the group of 5. I think they're a team that could win the group of 5 bid. You got Cal, SMU. When you look at the schedule, big picture, as of right now, this is my soapbox moment. I cannot stand preseason rankings. I think they are absolutely worthless. I think there are teams that are ranked that aren't going to be ranked. I think there are teams that are on that schedule that may be ranked higher by that time. But when you look at the schedule, Florida State has enough good quality games in their way. They can play their way back into this. To Trevor's point, week 1 of who you are isn't necessarily who you're going to be in week 10.
And let alone week 1. This is week 0. So there's only a few games going on right now. And so part of the committee's job is to look at who a team is and right now and where they're going to be. People are going to say, okay, maybe that was a tough loss, but who knows? In a few weeks, you get a chance to beat some ranked teams like Clemson or at least face some ranked teams. And then also with that 12-team playoff, there are more slots, more opportunities. Even if you don't win the ACC, you may get one of those at-large bids. And so though this is somewhat of a devastating loss because you're a top 10 team, it's definitely a loss you can recover from based off an expanded playoff format and teams that you play down the line based off your strength of schedule.
Let's go big picture ACC because they did a great job of it on College Game Day this morning. We were talking about it. We believe that the ACC is wide open. A lot of people thought that Florida State was going to be the toast of the ACC, and that very well may still be the case as we get to the end of the season. Clemson's a really good team. Miami's a really good team. I'm big on Virginia Tech because of their schedule and who they've got coming back. I think they're going to be a threat to win this conference. And now Georgia Tech. They go to another country and beat a team a lot of people thought was the favorite in the ACC. You got to throw Georgia Tech into a conversation now where we could go 6 or 7 deep and say, hey, this conference is going to be fun to watch.
And that'll be good for the top of the ACC to maybe get more than one team in. Because as the committee looks at the quality of the depth in this conference, they'll say, look, there's quality wins in here, and we don't just have to take the conference champion just based on the rule. I think that's important. But I also think that the ACC has some really big games with Miami at Florida, with NC State at Tennessee.
Sure.
You know, these are Clemson at Georgia. These are massive games for the ACC's perception.